Hello, friends and students. I am again before you with this new video which will benefit the postgraduate students who has offered Indo English Fiction as their special paper, or to those who are thinking of doing their PhD research on Indo English Fiction. Friends, you know that Indo English Fiction is a new branch added to the whole gamut of English literature. Friends, the Indo English Fiction is the area which has been not groped up, and we have more to do in this area. This area is a beautiful field for the researchers to know and research how this Indo-English literature has been able to carry our famous Indian culture. So, let us have a very brief description of how this Indo-English fiction has become now a prominent genre of English literature. Friends, the story of the Indian English novel is really the story of a changing India. Indian writing in English has come quite a long way from the mere use of English language to the authentic tool for expressing one's idea, thoughts, concepts, and imagination. There was a time when education was a rare opportunity and speaking English was thought unnecessary. It has attained maturity, but it is not that it suddenly emerged from nowhere. It has had its phases of development. The stories were already there in the myths, in the folklore, and the upturned languages and cultures. India has always been a land of stories. The demarcation between ruler and reality being very narrow. Indian writers in English have made the most significant contribution to the field of English literature. Ever since the publication of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee Rajmohan Wives in 1864, Indian novel has grown considerably in bulk, variety, and maturity. The small beginning has now attained a luxuriant growth and branched off in various directions. The development of Indian novel follows certain definite patterns of its gradual progression from the imitative stage to the realistic and from psychological to the experimental stage. The Indian English novel has its traces in the fiery talks of Henry Desrosiers, the spiritual prose of Tagore, and the truth and non-violence dictums preached by Mahatma Gandhi. With the coming of Mulk Raj Anand, Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan, and Bhavani Bhattacharya on the literary horizon, the Indian English novel has begun its smooth journey. The early novels in India are not just patriotic depictions of Indianness, but the consortium of the fiery patriotism and spiritualism. Now, with the Indian diaspora being reckoning force in the publishing world, Indian English speaks a global tongue unconfined to any particular culture or heritage. The Indian diaspora raises the curtain on the fantastic mythical realities that were part of domestic conversations in the village age. Salman Rushdie fascinates critics with his chutneyfication of history and language as well. He opens the door for a plethora of writers. Amitabh Ghosh dabbles in post-colonial realities, and Bikram Seth fuses poetry and prose with an air of Victorian grandeur. Women writers explore old wives' tales, condemned exploitation, and try to make sense of the fast changing pace of the new world. Kamala Das explores women's plight in India and the world, and others like Shashi Deshpande paint characters who blame their own complacence for their sorry condition. Indian English begins with a bang when Tagore and later on V.S. Nepal get the Nobel Prize of Literature. Now, Indian English novels are sparking of debates about huge advances, plagiarism, and film rights. English masala and a dose of spiritual realism are only the tip of the iceberg. The Indian audience and the rest of the world have a lot to look forward to when they get an Indian English novel in their hands. The big four of Indian writing in English arrive on the scene, and they are well said to be the founders of true Indo English novel. They could not help themselves away from the Gandhian philosophy, which consciously or unconsciously entered their creative writing. It is in this phase that we come across excellent novels for the first time, as is evident from Mulk Raj Anand's Untouchable, 1935, R.K. Narayan Swamy and Friends, 1935, Raja Rao's Kanthapura, 1938, and Bhavani Bhattacharya's So Many Hungers. In Coolie by Mulk Raj Anand, the social disparity in India is laid bare. In R.K. Narayan's imaginary village Malgudi, the invisible men and women of our teeming population come to life and act out life with all its perversities and whimsicalities. In Kanthapura by Raja Rao, Gandhiism awakes in a sleepy village down the deep south. In So Many Hungers by Bhavani Bhattacharya, he throws light on the hunger of lust, selfishness, seditions, etc. India now no longer needs to be depicted by the outsiders. The perspectives from within ensure more clarity and serve as social documentaries as well. They show to the West that there was much more in the Orient than could be inferred from Umar Khayyam, Tagore, or Kipling. They decide that they would prefer the familiar to the fancied. They opine that English may the language of our intellectual makeup, but our mother tongue is the language of our emotional makeup. But our mother tongue, such is the creative genius of the Big Four that they discover a whole new world in Indo English fiction. The Big Four examine minutely the Indian sensibility and expose the foibles of the Indian way of life. The other major novels, like G.B. Deshani's All About H. Hatter, 1948, make a major breakthrough in the formal experimentation which becomes a masterpiece of remarkable artistry. Hatter's dazzling, puzzling, leaping prose is the first genuine effort to drift away from the Englishness of the English language. It creates indelible impression in the minds of the readers by its highly evocative narrative technique and the language unparalleled in the history of Indo English fiction. After the 1950s, Indian novelists feel interested in private sphere than the public one. They begin to delineate in their works the individual's quest for the self in all varied complex forms along with the predicament they are put into. Most of them, in their eagerness to find new themes, renounce the larger world in favor of the inner man and engage themselves in search for the essence of human living. Novelists like Anita Desai, Arun Joshi, and Nayantara Sahgal changed the entire perspective of Indo-English novel, and their works contain seeds for future development. Anita Desai is one of India's leading authors. Most of her novels reveal the breakdown of human relationship. She deals with the psychological aspects of her characters. She explores the inner climate, the climate of sensibility in her novels, and adds a new dimension to the growth of Indo-English fiction. A striking feature of Arun Joshi's fiction is his experimentation with different narrative techniques. While the big four are still creatively alive, the novelists of the second generation keep on bringing out remarkable novels from time to time. The contribution of Kamala Markandeya, Manohar Malgonkar, and others has already been recognized in and outside the country. Starting with Ruth Paravel Jhabwala, known for engaging comedies of North Indian urban middle class life, the women novelists have displayed not only authenticity but also brought a fresh flavor to their works, whereas Kamala Markandeya takes us to the heart of a South Indian village where life has not changed for centuries. Another writer, Nayantara Sahgal, with her work Reach Like Us, 1985, has shown a very charming style of storytelling, while Kamala Das, with her autobiographical and excellent works, creates a path hitherto unknown to Indo-English novelists. Among the contemporary writers, Amitabh Ghosh has shown his tremendous genius in the Indo-English fiction. His two novels, The Circle of Region 1986 and The Shadow Lines 1988, establish him as the finest writer who is born out of the post-Midnight Children syndrome in Indo-English fiction. Bikram Seth attains a dizzy height of success with The Golden Gate 1986 and A Suitable Boy 1993. He surprises the literary world with his brilliant novel A Suitable Boy, which can be compared with Leo Tolstoy's War and Peace and Marcel Proust's Remembrance of Things Past. Upamanyu Chatterjee, with his magnificent novel English August 1988, gets remarkable success. His tone is ironic and he hits all the foibles of the contemporary Indian bureaucracy. He brilliantly uses Indianized English in his novels. His contemporary Shashi Tharoor, The Great Indian Novel 1989, is again one of the greatest achievements of Indo-English fiction. In the 1990s, Rohinton Mistry has emerged as a significant novel writer. His Such Long Journey 1991 is his maiden attempt in the genre in which he deals with the predicament of modern life. Experimentation in English language by Indian writers in recent years has witnessed a good number of Indo-English fiction writers who have stunned the literary world with their works. Their works have enriched the world literature as well, for which they have been awarded with accolades and prizes. When we go through this whole progress of Indo-English fiction, we find that there are two kinds of writers who contributed to this new genre of novel. The first group of writers focuses on the various social issues like poverty, class discrimination, social dogmas, rigid religious norms, etc., which have an appeal to the Western audience. The second group of the group includes those who are Indian by birth, but they have lived abroad. They are at ease with the English language and have enriched it with their creativity and modern outlook. While handling Indian sensibility, these writers not show the slavish imitation in their writings. They have used English with a new flavor and freshness by fusing Indian spirit in the foreign language. They have coined new words and idiomatic expressions in English. Some of these terms are now accepted as English words in dictionaries also. These coinages and idioms have found their permanent place in world literature too. The West has a typical notion about the third world countries where their eyes only see poverty, wretchedness, terrorism, lack of system, failure of democracy, and so on and so forth. The writers focusing on these are confident of getting recognition and appreciation by the West. But this scenario has changed radically in recent years. The Indian writers now contribute hugely to the corpus of English fiction and are no longer sympathy seekers. They have their own English and their genuine experience to share. A number of novelists has produced significant novels making a mark in the literary world. The most sensational literary event in the recent past is probably the publication of Salman Rushdie's magnum opus, Midnight's Children, which appears with a blistering international success immediately after its release. It motivates the young Indian novelists like Arundhati Roy and others. Her novel, The God of Small Things, has earned much critical attention all over the world and faced her most covetous Booker's Prize. She successfully does experimentation with the language and has been duly rewarded for it. With the number of readers, Indo English fiction has increased and improved the quality and artistry too. The writers are now no longer active users of English, but they have English as their lingua franca. They express themselves with native proficiency. Indian English fiction is now a world literature. It has struggled, endured indifferences of the West, and now finally emerged as a clear winner. The new breeds of writers like Chetan Bhagat, Amish Tripathi, and others have captured the imagination of the country in a more artistic way. These writers have introduced a new form of narrative innovation or linguistic experimentation. Such writers have native-like proficiency of the English language and ability to handle it in a more creative way. In this way, we can safely conclude that the Indo English fiction has reached the height from where it can look forward to a brilliant prospect of sublimation and saturation. It has come as a green zone for researchers and writers to open the area which has hitherto been untouched and unraveled. Thank you. So friends, I think this lecture will be a great help when you will go to decide about your areas of research, or if you are a postgraduate student, you can also be benefited by it while preparing your additional paper of Indo English fiction. Thank you.